Questions to the Minister for Foreign Affairs. We move now to take leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. And I call on Deputy Pearse Doherty, please.
And before I begin, Taoiseach, there's an issue I'd like to raise with you, and that's that the people that have been impacted by MICA scandal are outside the gates of Leinster House every day, indeed for the last number of months, in pursuit of justice as their homes are crumbling around them. Yet, as often is the case, the government suggestions of a redress scheme were selectively leaked last night before the families involved even had sight of the working group report. Now, that's completely unacceptable. There's families that didn't have a decent night's sleep last night because of worrying if that leak was accurate and what it would mean for them. So you need to treat these families with respect, and instead of leaks and speculation over the next number of days, you need to provide clarity, move swiftly and do the right thing in terms of 100% redress. Tánaiste, tá costaí cónithe imíar fian, le costaí foniu, costaí cormyani, agus tíhiachta dú ahan le. Agus bhí díma áram agus mé gléo an tuairis godálsí an bord chinneachta cónithe margin. Tá bolscúdás cin jaifan géad in nui gondai, agus is cin ceharfan géad in ahan condai eile. Agus tesagum sa go greidan tesa gur cheart income na tíarnaí talún a chasint a horta chinantaí, ach ní higla ibrithe agus tealaí maran eile de seo halacu. Tá réite an, I réiti a higa gur a grís an wadid am liana, si sin casca horar di kís, agus tor cridfas chena de chinantaí le aige de chonial sna pácu sacu héin. Tánaiste, the cost of living crisis is out of control, and every day we're seeing the cost of energy, fuel, childcare and housing go up. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the rental market, and that was laid bare in the Q2 rental report published by the Residential Tenancy Board this morning. Its findings are some of the grimmest for some time, and it will cause further concern and anxiety to renters and those who are stuck in the rental market. There has been a double-digit rental inflation in 9 counties, and all other counties have seen inflation of over 4%, with many approaching 10%. And despite all your lofty, ill-thought-out pronouncements about budget-day spending, the fact remains that your government has no plan to put a halt to these runaway rents. And that's the reality, Tánaiste. Now, I know you believe that landlords should be prioritised and their incomes are more important than renters being able to have a decent life. But I don't think even you, Tánaiste, could deny the fact that renters are being fleeced and landlords are milking it based on these figures that we see from the RTB today. Runaway rents need to stop, and they need to be halted, and the choice is yours and your government's. The budget is just 2 weeks away, so renters, Tánaiste, need to be given a guarantee that their rents are not going to increase in the coming years, and in fact, they need their rents to reduce. So if this government is serious about protecting renters, it would ban rent increases for 3 years for all new and existing tenancies. And in the budget, what you should do, and I'm asking you, will you do it, is to introduce a refundable tax credit for renters that will reduce the cost of rent and put a month's rent back into the pockets of workers and families who live in rented accommodation.
Thank you, Deputy. Tánaiste.
Thanks, Deputy. First of all, just in relation to the MICA issue which you mentioned, I haven't seen that report myself, but so I can't confirm whether what's been reported is correct or not. But I can say that at yesterday's meeting, Minister Bryan thanked the working group for their engagement and involvement in the process over the past few months. In particular, he acknowledged the stress and hardship which affected homeowners face and assured them that enhancements would be made to the scheme. The working group is going to submit the final report to the Minister today, the 30th of September 2021, and the Minister will then, along with the Taoiseach, myself, Minister Ryan, Mr Donoghue, Minister McGrath, with the input from the Attorney-General, consider the proposals with a view to them being presented to Cabinet. Minister O'Brien intends to bring a memorandum to Cabinet in the coming week. Just in relation to your comments earlier, Deputy, what I believe is what I say, and what you said is not what I believe. And it's a classic tactic of populist politicians to claim that their opponents believe something and then argue with it. To put words into somebody's mouth and then criticise them for it. It's a classic tactic of a populist politician. And I just want to put on the record that is what you're engaging in as a party. You tell people what they believe, you tell people what they think, and then you tell them how awful they are. That's rubbish, and it's rubbish politics, and it's something you engage in all the time. Just in relation to rents, Deputy, rents in Ireland are too high. That's my view, that's the government's view, and that has an impact on people's finances and the standard of living that they can have. It has an effect on their well-being, and also has an effect on the labour market too, because of course high rents make it harder to get staff, push up labour costs, and that has an impact generally on the economy too. Because of that, the government has introduced a rent freeze in real terms. That means that people will not see rent increases greater than the rate of inflation. It was Sinn Féin's policy before you decided you were against it. It has now been introduced, and that means people will see much lower rent increases in the year to come, and hopefully no rent increases at all. But the crisis that we face in the rental market isn't just one of affordability, it's also one of availability. And we need to make sure that we don't end up in a situation whereby there are fewer properties available for people to rent. And we've seen an exodus from the rental market of landlords and property owners who are essentially selling up, issuing people with notices to quit. And that's not good either. So we need to make sure that whatever we do deals with both the affordability issue, which is the cost of rent, and also the availability issue. And you've seen plenty of examples of people, 50, 100, 200 people queuing up just to see one rental property. And we don't want to make the availability issue worse. And we need to bear that in mind in any decision that we make. What can we do about it? Cost rental is a big part of Housing for All. The government investing in cost rental, providing homes for people to rent. People who don't qualify for social housing do qualify for cost rental. We have the first units available now. You'll see that ramp up considerably over the next couple of years. And I think that's an important intervention by the government in the rental market. You'll also see the Land Development Agency, a state developer now established, building properties for people to rent by and social housing as well. And you're seeing a big ramp up in the amount of social housing being provided by government. Only 600 units in 2016, 6,000 units in the year before the pandemic, going to rise to 9,000 or 10,000 units. How does that help? Provides housing for people who are on the social housing list. That frees up properties for other people to rent or buy. So they're the interventions that the government is taking. A rent freeze in real terms, linking rents to inflation, cost rental, government providing more rental properties for people to rent, the LDA increasing supply, and also crucially a social housing programme, the biggest in the history of the state, ensuring that we free up properties for people to rent or buy.
Deputy Doherty.
Taoiseach, I'm not interested in your snipes against me, right? That doesn't interest me. For years we have been raising the issue that rent is out of control, and for years you have stood in that chair and gave different excuses. Now forget about what Sinn Féin is saying. Just listen to what the RTB is saying. Rent increases in the last year in Kilkenny went up 15.5%, in Clare 16.1%, in Longford 15.9%, in Leitrim 17%. You can talk about real rent freezes and so on and so forth. Inflation is running at 3%. Taoiseach, we told you that when you introduced your policy. It means that rent can continue to increase by 3%. You talk about rent caps for the last number of years of 4%, yet every single county has breached them year on year. Now, Taoiseach, you've been in government for over 10 years. You've been Taoiseach for a large portion of that. And yet, in Dublin today, if you're renting an average 3-bedroom house in the city where you live, you're paying €2,105. Now, what I'm saying to you, what Sinn Féin is saying to you, and more so what renters are saying to you, is you need to prioritise them and their cost of living over the income of the landlords. So freeze rents and put a month's rent back into people's pockets by a refundable tax credit.
Thanks, Deputy. I'm not interested in your swipes against me either, but I am going to call out populism when I see it. And it's a classic tactic of populist politicians from the far left and the far right and everything in between all around the world to display this tactic. You tell your opponents what they think, you tell your opponents what they believe, and then you tell them how awful they are for believing or thinking those things. But what you actually do is you fabricate quotes and you put words in people's mouths, and that's the classic tactic of a populist politician. You need to know you're that, and people need to know that you're that. In relation to the past 10 years being in government, again, you speak as if Sinn Féin is not an establishment party on this island. Sinn Féin has been in office in the past 20 years on this island longer than my party has, longer than Fianna Fáil has, and longer than the Greens have. You are an establishment party. You're a party of government on this island for most of the past 20 years. You increased the rents. You increased the rents. You increased the rents in Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
I know Mary Lou asked this question yesterday, but with respect for leaders' questions, the Taoiseach did not answer any question.
Yeah, well,
I put forward the facts from the
chair
RTB.
does not have the authority to direct the Taoiseach or the Taoiseach to give any deputy the answer that
it makes a mockery out of leaders'
Sorry,
questions
well,
if the Taoiseach is going to involve himself in
Deputy,
diversion
the time
every
is up,
day.
Deputy Roche.